On a train going deep into the Australian interior, a man saw a very hungry Aboriginal mother and child before getting off the train. He gave them his last bit of food right after. He came to a rest stop, where the fields were desolate and deserted, and the natural environment was extremely harsh. The man asked the station manager where my appointment was. The station manager was struggling with a ball of wool in his hand with a stunned expression, his eyes never leaving the TV screen. This made the man suspect that I came to meet someone. He would take me to the main area until the man asked him if there was a toilet. The station manager, touched with a stunned expression, pointed behind the man. The more he thought about it, the more strange this place felt. What he had witnessed along the way made him more alert. He finally found a shabby toilet, rotten around inside, flies buzzing everywhere, but he was still a man civilized, endured squatting in a dirty, filthy, and smelly toilet. He was determined not to relieve his sorrows in another open place. But even while he was in that toilet, someone still came to find him. This person was the driver the man had arranged to meet earlier. Trying to suppress his anger, the man pretended to finish his business, washed his face quickly, and then went into the desert with the other driver. The two sat in the car. The atmosphere became awkward and stuffy. However, after the car had only gone a short distance, the driver began to greedily ask for more money. Although the man was very dissatisfied, he still had to endure. Swallow the bitter to make it sweet. If he did not agree, the driver would threaten to take him home. The car continued to drive on the vast desert, getting hotter and hotter. The man felt hot and wanted to turn on the air conditioner, but the driver refused, saying that it would damage the engine. At this point, the man just wanted to die, spending hundreds of dollars to rent a car that was about to die. Even the only air conditioner that was still working was not working. He glared at the driver, his heart filled with regret for coming to this terrible place with the girls. On the contrary, the driver appeared extremely indifferent. This made the man feel even more uncomfortable, but he could only silently endure for a while after the tire suddenly exploded due to the high temperature combined with the rocky road. The driver still kept a calm face, a cigarette while the man was sweating profusely, changing the tire although his insides were burning, but he could only vent all his anger on the tire. The poor driver was like a prison guard standing there supervising him as he worked. At this moment in the distance, two stray dogs were fiercely biting each other. The image was no different from the reflection of their situation. The man was about to step forward to chase the more ferocious dog away, but the driver was one step faster. At first the man thought he would help the injured dog, but unexpectedly he intended to throw a stone to kill the witness. This scene made the man think of his own fate. The driver's cruel actions made him a little scared. However, he tried to suppress his emotions and quietly changed the tire. On the next stretch of road, the man was completely silent until nightfall. The two stopped to rest in the middle of nowhere. As soon as they started talking openly, the man told the driver about the purpose of his trip to the mine. It turned out that he was there to find a job. At first, the driver thought that the man was hiding some secret. He warned the man that the mine was not a good place. He could be fooled. Moreover, the people there were not easy to deal with. He was often bullied. However, the man only responded with a blank look. He had been in much worse places than this, so no matter how difficult it was, he could handle it. The next morning, the two continued on their way to the mine. This time, the driver behaved even more absurdly. He slept right in the passenger seat, making the man his reluctant driver. It seemed that this man could really endure all kinds of bullying. However, surprise and joy came to them very quickly. The car had only gone a short distance when it suddenly broke down in the middle of the road. The driver immediately became angry and blamed the man. Then he let out a cry. The vulgar words, and he was so bad the man still kept his cool. Maybe he had suffered too much bullying before, so now things were difficult for him. The car broke down in the middle of the road and was stuck in the middle of nowhere. What should they do to get out of this situation now? After blaming themselves and apologizing to the driver, the man walked alone while relieving his sadness. He accidentally discovered something surprising in the vast golden land nearby. There was a pile of rocks. Tien went closer to see. If you don't look, then look and you will be startled. Among the exposed rocks there was a very special rock. Its surface glowed yellow. The man couldn't help but wonder if it was gold. He immediately turned his head to look at the driver, thought for a while, and then called him back. Actually, the man wanted to monopolize this gold, but without a means of transportation. He couldn't take it away. The driver Tien went closer and used a lighter to heat the yellow rock. The miracle was the surface. The rock was not burned black. This proved that it was not an ordinary rock, but real gold. Both of them were extremely excited. They started digging hard for the gold, but the more they dug, the more they realized this gold block was much bigger than what they imagined. They tried to use human strength to lift the gold block, but failed. Next, they used a pickup truck, but tried twice, but still could not pull the gold block out. At this time, both of them felt uncomfortable. The treasure was right in front of them, but could not be taken away. Both of them suddenly became confused. They could only sit and look at the treasure in front of them and feel sad. At this time, it was dark. The first threat that appeared were the Australian wild dogs. The driver, with a lot of survival experience, started going around to find dry wood to make a fire to chase them away. At night, the man stood there wondering in broad daylight why there were wild dogs looking at them. He observed the surroundings, but did not detect anything unusual. However, his heart was filled with suspicion. He had to follow the driver if he did not want to be left alone in this wilderness. Indeed, as dusk fell, the dogs began to bark. The two lit a fire, and the driver could not contain his excitement and began to dance happily. This amount of gold was enough for him to live happily for several lifetimes. On the contrary, the man appeared calmer. He knew clearly that if he could not take this amount of gold away, everything would be just a dream. When he calmed down, the driver thought of a solution. One person would stay here to guard the gold, and one person would go back to find the digger. Otherwise, with such a large block of gold, they would not be able to take it away. But the problem was who would stay here to guard it and who would go find the digger. At this time, the driver took the initiative to speak up. He said, "I know where to find the digger." His intention was clearly to let the man stay and guard the gold. This made the man worried. If the driver did not return in time, he would either die of thirst or become dog food. If he returned with many others, wouldn't he become a fish on the chopping block for everyone to tear apart? Seeing the man's anxiety, the driver repeatedly promised to make sure. He said he would return within 5 days. He also said he would carefully ask about the mining machine. Seeing that the man didn't answer, he immediately changed his tone and said that if the man wanted to return to find the mining machine, he was also willing to stay here to guard the gold. The driver, he clearly understood that the new man here was completely unfamiliar with this land, so he could catch him. After thinking for a while, the man finally spoke. He decided to stay and guard the gold. The driver would return. At this time, the driver began to guide the man through the harsh conditions of the surrounding environment. Arrange food and water properly. Avoid the harsh sunlight and wild dogs. If strangers come near, you must know how to respond. Otherwise, you may lose your life here. However, those warnings did not make the man falter. I still stayed and guarded the gold. Early the next morning, the driver gave the man most of his belongings and a small knife for self-defense and hunting. If he ran out of food, he could hunt in the nearby area. The man felt a little suspicious. He wouldn't be back for 5 days, so why was he preparing as if he had been there for 5 years? Little did he know that at this point, the driver had already set a trap. Afraid of gold, the man was found filling the hole he had dug all day yesterday. He then set up a tent to shade himself from the sun next to a dry tree stump. The man realized that he was extremely clumsy and unprofessional. Then he tried to check the satellite phone. Hello, this is the Telecommunication Television Center. It seems that they use our country's satellite. After resting for a while, he started to look for firewood, but just a small scorpion appeared. It was enough to make him sweat. Cold. He was confused. He grabbed a piece of wood, intending to risk his life with the scorpion. It could be seen that his experience in surviving in the wild was extremely lacking. After struggling to deal with it for a while, the scorpion finally left on its own. The man ended his first battle at night. The sound of the wild dog Chu Vang echoed everywhere. The man was full and safe all night. Early the next morning, he struggled to go to the toilet. Due to the limited water source and the food being too dry, the process of relieving his sadness was difficult. It looked extremely painful. He was about to use his hands to do it in the Indian style, but thinking about the scarcity of water, he stopped. At this moment, the satellite phone suddenly rang, and he hurriedly ran to answer the phone. Before he could pull up his pants, the ringing stopped abruptly as soon as he arrived. This made the man feel frustrated. It had only been 1 day, and he had already felt extremely miserable. So, what should he do for the next 4 days of hell? But when he looked at the gold block in the distance, he felt that everything was worth it. Later, while preparing firewood for the evening, he accidentally discovered a reflective object in the distance. It seemed that someone was about to pass through this area. In order to avoid the gold block being discovered, he quickly covered it with a rock and carried his luggage to another place. But it was this move that helped him find the plane wreck. Looking at the inscription on the fuselage, it seemed that it came from Korea. The man got off and looked carefully, realizing that this was a perfect hiding place. Then he began to renovate the plane. Soon, a Syrian-style studio apartment was completed. The man sat on a soft sofa, who was interested in the spray soda but thought he couldn't drink too much. So he closed the bottle cap, just like we did when we were kids. However, this place was too far from the place where the gold was hidden. So he began to disassemble the plane and transport the materials back to the old place to build a temporary hiding place. After a hard day, he finally completed the hiding place, which was not only beautiful but also very sturdy so that he could observe the gold block at all times. He also deliberately left a window. At this time, all the worries and anxiety in Dan disappeared. He quietly waited for the driver to return. However, due to the harsh conditions around him, after only 2 days, the man's spirit was almost broken. But when he saw the sparkling gold block beside him, he couldn't help but be happy and felt that all the effort was worth it. Finally, after looking at the gold block a few more times, he made an important decision. In just a moment, the man used his bare hands to strike a golden color. If he couldn't take the whole block away, then bringing back a small color would be enough to make up for many days of effort. But the man's greed did not allow him to do so. While he was holding the golden cow in his hands, something strange happened. The driver, after many days of silence, suddenly called. The man holding the gold coin listened to the driver's progress report, but the news he received made him fall into the abyss because the engine was overheating. It might take the driver a few more days to get there. Now, even holding the gold in his hand and leaving was impossible. To urge the driver to come quickly, the man told him about having struck a gold coin. He wanted to leave this place as soon as possible, but the driver was not satisfied with that little gold. He wanted it all. It seemed that his greed was much greater than the man's. There was no other way. The man had to continue guarding the gold coin. A few days passed. He had picked up all the dry wood nearby to maintain the fire to drive away the Australian wild dogs. The man had to carry a torch to find dry wood. On the way, he heard the terrible roar of the wild animals around. He was extremely nervous and scared. But if he couldn't find firewood tonight, he would become dinner for the wild dogs. So he had to grit his teeth and continue. Looking for wild animals here is much more ferocious than he imagined before. Just one scorpion is enough to make him have to use a stick to deal with. Now seeing the pack of wild dogs surrounding him, he was scared and ran towards the fire. He knelt down on the ground in despair, watching the fire slowly die down. That night, he didn't dare to close his eyes, trying to endure until dawn. Now the fire was completely out, looking towards the sun about to rise in the distance. It seemed like he still had a glimmer of hope. Mr. Lee's body was tired, returning to his hiding place to make up for his sleep, still holding the yellow in his hand. However, the burning pain on his face made him unable to sleep. He had to sit up to drink water. Suddenly, a snake appeared next to the man. Even scorpions were afraid. Now he held a small knife, intending to kill the snake. It seemed like hunger had forced him to overcome the fear, and his heart hesitated for a moment. He decided to rush at the snake. The result was not only Did he not touch it, but also spilled all the drinking water? The man hurriedly picked up the water bottle, and in this harsh desert, can it not be there is food, but no water? Then surely he will die. He keeps scolding himself for being stupid. Despair once again comes to him. Then he takes the container of food he ate and licks the rest inside clean. This time he no longer worries about the pain when going to the toilet. All is just water, can be seen in the mirror. In the desert sometimes there are tornadoes. The man is worried that his hiding place will be washed away. The man immediately goes back to the wreck to dismantle some more parts to find a hiding place, but at this moment he suddenly catches a glimpse of someone approaching him. Luckily, he is not near the big block of gold in the middle of this desolate land. Encountering a stranger, even more dangerous, encountering a wild animal. The man quickly hides inside the plane in anxiety, observing every move of the stranger. Seeing that person is about to approach, he quickly cowers in the corner, panting with excitement, praying that the person will leave quickly. However, the noise he made was detected by the other person. The man also hides small yellow tangerine in his pocket and pretended to sit still as if nothing had happened. "Are you hiding?" the woman called him. The man was so scared that he didn't dare to move. After a moment of hesitation, he held his bag and walked out of the plane. Trembling, the woman asked, "Are you picking up trash?" The man was so scared that he didn't dare to raise his head, just afraid that the woman would discover his secret. At first, everything was fine, but the man's expression made the woman suspicious. She kindly offered him a piece of dried snake meat. The man firmly refused. Seeing his reaction, the woman continued to act kind and told him that there was a lake 5 kilometers away and there was a shadow. "Why are you here?" the man cautiously replied. "I like this place better." This answer made the woman even more suspicious. She looked at the cloth bag in the man's hand. Where was he going to take it? He was very worried. Seeing that the man did not trust her, the woman stood up without saying a word. The man walked towards his hiding place, afraid that the large block of gold would be discovered. The man quickly called her back. In fact, the woman had discovered his hiding place before. She wanted to find out what secret this man was hiding. The man began to panic because the gold he found was right next to his hideout so that the woman would not find out. He quickly lied that it was just where he went to the toilet and that he often stayed there. He also gave up his seat on the plane to the woman. The man's expression and flattery made the woman even more curious about his hideout. Seeing that she insisted on going to see, he hurriedly walked towards the mine, deliberately avoiding the hideout, wanting to lure the woman away. The mine was also where he would go to work. The man's actions made the woman even more curious. She guessed that he was hiding something and kept asking questions, making the man's mind almost explode. In the end, the man could not contain his anger, but the woman remained very calm. She thought that the man was lying. This made the man even more worried. He gasped and tried to adjust his physical condition. However, the woman continued to nag. The man silently endured, but in the end, the woman still decided to go towards his hideout. He tried his best to stop her, but he still couldn't stop the woman. The man glanced at the golden mark anxiously, afraid that she would discover it. But at this moment, the woman was struggling with his hideout, wanting to see what secret was there. The man couldn't bear it anymore and shouted at her loudly. The woman immediately turned around, thinking that there must be some secret here and that man must have an accomplice. The more she talked, the more she incited those greedy people who couldn't live in the city anymore. "You guys come here and take things that don't belong to you. Go away, city brat." The man finally steeled himself once more, but seeing the blood on the woman's head, he couldn't help but panic. He didn't want to commit murder, but things had come to this, and he didn't know what to do. He could only gasp for breath, his face bewildered. Looking at the man's condition, one could see that his body had been destroyed. Began to weaken. To quickly deal with the body, he hurriedly dug a hole to bury and searched for useful things on her body. These items would help him continue to survive here. Then he buried the woman in the hole, but his mood still could not calm down even though he had killed the woman, but he had never killed anyone before, so he was still afraid. But what he did not expect was that the body that had just been buried was discovered by a pack of Australian wild dogs and dragged up. The man thought that he could not leave the woman's body here, so he chased the wild dogs away, dragging the body to a very far place, then piled up a large pile of firewood, intending to burn it to erase all traces. In the fierce fire, the woman's body had turned to dust. At this time, the man suddenly shed tears. I think those were probably tears of regret for the amount of gold that he had become so distorted that he himself did not realize. That night, he did not sleep early, just sat still looking at the gold in front of him, wondering if all of this was worth it. However, disaster struck. Early the next morning, he received a call. The driver's voice said that the bad news was that the excavator had broken down on the road, so it was moving very slowly. The man had to wait a few more days. Hearing this news, the man fell into despair again. He had been waiting very hard for many days. If he continued to stay here, he was afraid that he would go crazy before he could bring the gold back. But for the sake of a beautiful life in the future, the man still tried to stay calm and patiently waited for the driver. At this moment, he saw a car approaching from afar. He anxiously observed the luggage in the car. Perhaps this was also a car going to the mine to make a living. Fortunately, that car did not go towards him, but just passed by and drove away. The man saw 2 blocks of gold in the distance. He felt both amused and wanted to cry. But things that made the man depressed continued to happen. While he was gathering dry wood for the evening, he noticed a sandstorm in the distance approaching him. He threw away the wood and ran as fast as he could towards his hiding place. The sandstorm had almost caught up with him by the time he reached his destination. He clung to the metal plate, still carefully hiding the yellow marks he had broken. The remaining necessities were blown away by the wind. Everything around was dark and gloomy, like the end of the world. After a night of struggling with the sandstorm, the man woke up from the sand pile. Unfortunately, his body was pierced by a wooden stick. This was definitely a fatal wound. The man was stunned as he searched for the remaining items. Although he was in a life-threatening situation, he did not forget the gold block. Even if he died, he had to touch that gold block to regain his spirit. He pulled out the sharp wooden stick from his body and stopped the bleeding himself in a simple and brutal way. After finishing the bandage, the man was tortured by his greed to the point of exhaustion. He fell asleep. At this time, he could no longer distinguish between dreams and reality. In his delirium, he saw the woman come to find him again, but strangely she did not harm him, but kindly gave him water. When he woke up, the first thing he thought of was still the gold block. At this time the phone rang. The man hurriedly told the driver about the woman's story. Luckily, she did not discover the gold block. Hearing the driver breathed a sigh of relief and told the man to quickly get rid of her. The man struggled and crawled to the gold block, hurriedly covered it with sand out of fear that others would know his secret. But he did not expect that the secret he tried to protect would be easily discovered by that woman. For a moment, he could not tell whether the woman in front of him was real or fake. It was not until she asked about her sister's whereabouts that the man realized that she was the dead woman's twin sister. Knowing the truth, the man immediately told her to leave. It could be seen that he still had a conscience in his heart and did not want to continue to harm anyone. However, not far away, a pack of wild dogs was sniffing the woman's scent, unable to ask about her sister's whereabouts. The woman had no choice but to leave. The man fell asleep. When he woke up, he saw that the woman had surrounded herself with fire. It seemed that she had no intention of harming him. However, the man's dying breath made the hungry wild dogs unable to bear it any longer. They patiently waited for their prey to die. The man shouted and chased her away, but when he turned around, he found himself surrounded by a pack of hungry wild dogs. He panicked and hurriedly called the driver to urge him on. Hurry up! The pack of wild dogs began to attack and tear the man apart. He used all his strength to fight back, but he didn't know that the driver had arrived long ago and was standing calmly in the distance, watching this play. I just hoped that the man would die soon so that he could monopolize the gold block. No matter how the man screamed on the phone, he remained cold and indifferent. Oh! The man was curled up on the ground while the wild dogs were approaching. It seemed that he could not escape this fate. In the end, he was bitten to death by the wild dogs. Seeing that the man was no longer resisting, the driver standing in the distance smiled. Before he died, the man suddenly regained consciousness. He looked at his job application. His greed had ruined him. The driver then drove the excavator to the place where the gold was buried. With a victorious look on his face, he looked down at the man's body. But just as he was about to pick up the gold, an arrow flew from afar and pierced his heart. Before he could see who had attacked him, he was already in hell. So, the last profitable fisherman, who are you? Try to guess that the value of a movie lies in its reputation and the value of a movie review lies in its perception. Today's story ends here. Thank you for watching the movie. What do you think of this movie? Please comment below and subscribe to help the channel grow.